just been connected to the largest spiritual network on the planet, The Jeffrey Daugherty Show. Jeffrey Daugherty. Sink or swim, deep end information, parabiblical research, spiritual technologies, personal empowerment. Be your own guru. Guide your own spirit. Master your own ascension. And now, showing you how, here's Jeffrey Daugherty.
Well, hello, folks. It's Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, back with you again. Thanks, Cliff, for that introduction. Folks, I want to talk to you starting today for some time. I'm not sure how long, but I want to talk with you about the facts, the figures, and the reality behind the message that I'm basically known for most of all, and for which I was on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie and other things like that. It's the book Apostle Paul Antichrist, and you write a book called Apostle Paul Antichrist, and right away people get a little bit upset, and people wonder, who the hell are you to write such a book? Well, let me just say first and foremost that I spent over 20 years as a licensed evangelist in three of the largest licensed minister. I worked as an evangelist mainly, also pastored churches. Three of the largest Protestant denominations in the world. So I was over 20 years a full-time licensed minister. I pastored several churches, worked as an evangelist, worked as a conference speaker, and spent over 20 years. Bible college graduate, in addition to an associate's degree from what we'd call a secular college, I guess. So I've read the Bible over 100 times, conservatively. I know how to work in the original languages, and that experience and the fact that I was a 100% dyed-in-the-wool proponent of Paul should make it at least interesting to you that now I've turned to become an opponent of Paul and an opponent of Pauline Christianity, because Paul was an opponent of Jesus, and Pauline Christianity opposes the true message of Jesus. We actually are in the place today where we've got to save Jesus from Christianity. I mean, as crazy as it sounds. But we do need to save Jesus from Christianity, because his name has been hijacked and applied to something that not only was he not a part of, but something that he is fourfold against. And the book is Apostle Paul Antichrist. And it is important sometimes to talk about credibility. Many of you know Scotty Roberts. He is the publisher of Intrepid Magazine. He is the host of the Paradigm Symposium. He wrote the book, here I am drawing a blank, Rise of the Nephilim. He also wrote a book with Dr. John Ward about the Exodus reality. He leads tours over to Egypt. So he's a man, been on Coast to Coast several times. He did the cover for the book, which is quite nice. And you ought to go ahead and listen to what he says. He said, with no fear of the impending label of postmodern as heretic, Jeffrey Daugherty has launched into a daring topic that shakes the very foundations of modern Christianity. Did Saul of Tarsus hijack the early Christian movement, thus creating, in every sense of the term, Pauline Christianity? Prepare to have your sensibilities shattered and your traditions truncated as you ask yourself, do I really know what lies beneath my religion? Scotty Roberts, publisher, Intrepid Mag, author, The Exodus Reality. That's somebody that knows what they're talking about, combined with someone that spent 30 years now studying the Bible and 20 years as a Protestant minister preaching the message of Paul. Now I'm writing a book called Apostle Paul Antichrist. And we've just released a new 410-page version of the book that's 50 extra pages, fully annotated, fully footnoted. And that was one of the criticisms of the first edition, that it did not have footnotes. It wasn't annotated. And I did that purposely, consciously, I still think it was the right thing to do, but I've been told by many that it wasn't, because I wanted to keep people in the story, in the narrative. I didn't want them flipping back and forth to look up footnotes, but then you open yourself up to criticism. Oh, it's just a story. He doesn't use any facts. And oh well, we put the footnotes in the book, so there's 50 additional pages. You can order the book at imnck.com. And also, many of you are listeners to Coast to Coast AM. And of course, George Norrie is the host of Coast to Coast AM, and George Norrie was kind enough to write the foreword for the book. And I just want to say something here that I don't know if I've heard it said, but it certainly needs to be said, and even if it ticks some people off. You know, there's this whole George Norrie versus Art Bell thing. Well, guess what, folks? I know a lot of you are fans of George Norrie. I know a lot of you are fans of Art Bell. Folks, it's not either or. It's not either or. It's okay to be fans of George Norrie. It's okay to be fans of Art Bell. And you don't have to exclude one if you're the other. It's all right to enjoy and appreciate George Norrie. It's all right to enjoy and appreciate at the same time Art Bell. That is not a zero-sum game. It's not either Norrie or Bell. Folks, our genre, our community, this alternative news, this paranormal type community, we're too small to start killing each other. You know, for 20 years I was a member of the Christian Army, and I was always surprised whenever a minister got in trouble, the first thing the Christians did was go out and shoot him. It was the only army in the world I used to preach that kills its wounded, until I saw the great George Norrie Art Bell debate. Look, folks, you may love George Norrie and not care for Art Bell. Well, guess what? Just talk about how you like George Norrie, and you don't have to talk bad about Mr. Bell. And if you love Art Bell, you don't have to talk bad about George Norrie. Let's don't be like the Christians that kill their wounded. Not that either one of those men are wounded, but there's no reason why we have to make it into an either-or thing. Our community is not large enough, not broad enough for us to be excluding great swaths of our membership. So that's my editorial for what it's worth. But George Norrie said this about the book: though a controversial novel, author Jeffrey Daugherty may upset and surprise some of you, but Apostle Paul Antichrist is well worth reading. Based on ancient and biblical facts, combining 20-plus years of biblical study, Daugherty seizes upon biblical truths we have been conditioned to for centuries and turns them on their head as are woven throughout this riveting story. Do not let the title turn you away. This tale calls the attention of every individual, regardless of belief system, and everyone can gain a never-before-experienced perspective that may shock you. Daugherty delivers innovation, talent, and bravery. George Norrie, host of Coast to Coast AM. Thank you for that, Mr. Norrie. And I think he's right. Regardless of what you believe, regardless of what you think, this book is well worth reading. This book does seize upon biblical truths that we've been conditioned to, and that's huge. We've been conditioned to them, and it turns them on their head and shows them in a light that we've never seen before. And don't let the title turn you away. It does call your attention, this book. You can gain a never-before-experienced perspective, and yes, it might even shock you. And the book is innovative. I don't know about the talent part. I guess it does take some amount of bravery to put it out there, but at any rate, men that know what they're talking about recommend you read this book. A guy that's been there, done that, recommends you read this book. And it's all about showing how Paul hijacked the message of Jesus to create a fear-based control matrix that we are still living under today. And one of the things that really surprises people about this book, it's called Apostle Paul Antichrist. And you're, of course, thinking about the Apostle Paul. You're thinking about Jesus, maybe. Maybe you're thinking about the book of Revelation. And then the book begins. And the first person you see in the book is Alexander the Great. And people are blown away by that. They're like, wait a second, did I pick up the the wrong book? Did they put the wrong cover on this book? Alexander the Great was enjoying the ride, basking in the warmth of the sun on his face. That's the first sentence in the book. And it kind of spins some people's heads. But we've got to understand where things come from. We've got to understand the origin of things before we can understand who they are, where they are, what they are at this time. That's one of the reasons why I encourage you to go back and discover your origins. The reason Alexander the Great is the first sentence in this book is because this whole story of Apostle Paul Antichrist starts with Alexander the Great. And people say, well, how in the world is that possibly true? Well, Alexander the Great was on his way to destroy Jerusalem. He was on his way to make a complete end of Jerusalem. His father, King Philip, had counseled him and taught him in the ways of war, and Jerusalem had always been a thorn in the side of many kings. It was always a very difficult little bunch, and for some reason no king or power had made a complete end of the Jews, and that was Alexander's stated goal. He was going to destroy Jerusalem completely. He was tired of it. He did not want it to be a thorn in his side as king and ruler. So he was on his way to Jerusalem to destroy the entire place, raze the whole thing. He was about ready to destroy the whole place. That's why the book begins with Alexander the Great, because that is the underpinning of the whole story. And what happened is Alexander the Great, on his way to Jerusalem, was met by the high priest of Israel at the time, a man named Jaddua, who showed him the book of Daniel and convinced him that the book of Daniel had been written about him. And as a result, Alexander the Great not only decided not to destroy Jerusalem, but he bestowed great gifts on Jerusalem and extended his protection to Jerusalem. So instead of being wiped out, Jerusalem was not only preserved but rewarded. And as you can well imagine, from that day, the Jewish people, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, began to take a very large interest in things Greek, things Greco, things Grecian. They began to learn a lot about Greek history. They began to learn a lot about Greek poetry. They began to appreciate Greek theater, Greek architecture. They began to appreciate Greek culture. And of course, that morphed into appreciating Greek religion, at least to some degree. And we have this picture of Judaism as this very well-defined, very pure, very homogenized religion. And the fact of the matter is, the Jewish religion, if you talk about pure Judaism, it's like talking about a purebred mutt. There is no such thing. And that's not designed to upset my Jewish friends. It's just the truth. The Jews' religion, Judaism today, is a combination of what they learned before they went to Egypt, what they learned while in Egypt, what they learned while in Babylon, and what they learned while under Greco oppression, and what they learned under Roman oppression. So Judaism is really an Egyptian, Babylonian, Greco-Roman hybrid religion. And if you begin to study that, and if you read books like The Exodus Reality, written by Scotty Roberts and Dr. John Ward, you'll begin to see, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. And you'll begin to understand that there's no such thing as pure Judaism. Just like there's no such thing as pure Christianity. Christianity is Greco-Roman and the pirated cultures of 100 other lands, all cobbled together as a great control matrix. And that's kind of the lesson of the first part, the very first page of Apostle Paul, Antichrist, my latest novel, the newest version of which, with 50 additional pages, fully footnoted and annotated, is available at imnck.com. The first printing was 354 pages. This new edition, 410 pages. We encourage you to get the book and take advantage of it. And that's how we started with Alexander the Great. And tomorrow, we're going to look at the second character in the book, Gamaliel, the renowned Jewish priest. And again, people are saying, what in the world is this guy talking about? Well, on tomorrow, you'll find out. Until then, this is Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, wishing you peace and light.
Stay connected with the largest spiritual network on the planet, www.imnck.com. On Facebook, Jeffrey Daugherty and Jeffrey Daugherty Show. And on Twitter at NCCabala. Visit imnck.com today and learn how to create yourself and live the life you'll love.